Thank you. So I did in fact have a DNA test from 23andMe and stuff, but I cut that stuff out because I figured out you don't really care that much about me, you'd rather hear about some other stuff and broader examples. Plus, as James said, I do have a train to catch. So, for those of you who have no idea where Minnesota is, that's it. It's in the middle at the top. And there's lots of snow, and lots of forests, and lots of things that make people from Nordic ancestries feel very comfortable. In fact, about the time that immigration from Sweden and Norway was at its peak, it was the top lumber industry in the world, and the top milling industry in the world. So there were a lot of farmers who came in, a lot of lumberjacks and so on who came in. Made people feel very comfortable, and it just grew and grew and grew. Now the same thing's happening all over again with very different cultures like the Hmong and Somalians. So, just some Minnesota companies. It is a real place that has real industry, and one of the byproducts of this is that people are very conservative. There's a lot of big company culture and a lot of fear of branching out and doing new things. A very strong corporate safety net that's not even a safety net in so much as it is gravity that keeps people from pulling away and starting new things. The startup culture is fairly small. There is decent software industry, but people keep getting bought or moving out to the Bay Area, both of which suck all of the startup culture out of Minnesota, so it just reinforces the whole conservative nature of it. So I thought it might be interesting. I look back and try to figure out, like, where did this whole Nordic US thing start? And, well, you could argue that it started with Leif Erikson and Finland, but since we've all sort of forgotten about that and made that up anyways, where it really started was New Sweden, colony back in the mid-1600s, right around Delaware. And this is what got a lot of Nordics very interested in the US for the next couple of hundred years, and where all the immigration started out. Now the thing, I spent an insanely long time working on, not this, but the next slide, and so I want to prepare you for the full awesomeness of it. It's an animated GIF. But I want you to fully appreciate the effort that went into creating this animated GIF, because it was a huge, enormous pain in the ass. So what I did is I went and looked back at census data starting in about 1850. Every 10 years, looking at Nordic immigrants across the country. And so yeah, I explained, check it out. Let's see, the darker the green, the more Nordic immigrants there are in a certain state. So what should be very clear to you as you watch this skip through and look at the years at the top right, is that in the late 1800s, there were a ton of Nordics coming particularly into the Midwest. And the point I'm trying to convince you of for this part and the rest of the talk is that has some sustained influences both in the Midwest and in other places on what the culture looks like. So here, in fact, is a different graph, right? The first one was actual foreign-born Nordics over time. This one is people who today, as of 2010, claim they are Scandinavian or Nordic, right? They have the ancestry, right? People today, they're 3, 4, 5 generations in. They still identify as a Nordic person, right? There's a lot of cultural stickiness, especially in the Midwest, where families tend to not move around the country. They grow up there, they stay there. Maybe they move away for a little while and then move back once they're settled down. And there's a lot of stickiness, a lot of love for the culture. You go around houses in Minnesota in the Midwest, there's a lot of Dala horses and Swedish pancakes being made and all those sorts of things. And unfortunately, lutefisk. So, again, I'm just showing you the same thing on a different scale. There are tons of Nordics up there. And so, my expectation was going into this that, okay, there's a bunch of Nordics up there, so the Nordic influence is probably going to be the strongest there, right? And so I'm going to focus in on that area when we're thinking about what does the Nordic influence look like versus trying to, look out in the Bay Area or more nationwide. And so here's one example of some of the characteristics we talked about. I'm not going to talk through them all again, but one of them was the egalitarian nature of a lot of Nordic cultures. Here's an example of a startup based in Minneapolis called Code 42 that makes software called Crash Plan. And the really interesting thing about this software is they try pretty hard to give it to you for free, to make it really easy for anybody to use. You have to, there's 4 different ways you can back up your software, right? One is to their central source, the next 3 are all free, right? To a friend, to another computer, to another folder. And those are all free. You get the full feature software. The only thing you don't get is putting this stuff in their cloud. So they make it trivial for you to not pay them any money to use their software, right? To make it very much a sort of peer-to-peer yet easy-to-use backup solution. Here's another example, another Minneapolis startup called Smart Things. They just got bought by Samsung for about $200 million. And again, they tried very hard to make things open and accessible to everybody, right? How do you make the Internet of Things accessible to normal people? Well, you make an app that's easy to use, you make it work with every type of device, be fully open, fully equal, everything's on the same page, right? They support every different protocol, they support all kinds of random devices from, even so far as the NAS, which is remarkably closed for IoT. Fatalist is another sort of characteristic that's come up over and over and over, right, in different senses of either. So this is an Icelandic phrase on the top, pervades, and it basically means it'll all work out fine. Everything's going to be okay, no worries. CCU, again, same idea, a little bit different of saying like, we don't care how hopeless the struggle is, we're going to keep going on anyways. And in Minnesota, we say it could be worse. Right? No matter how bad something is, it could be worse. You know, my dad died in a train accident last week. It could be worse, could be my mom too. And as you can tell just listening to me, very much the sort of things are okay, everything's fine, don't get too excited here. Settle down, it doesn't matter how good it is or how bad it is. Could be worse. Not too bad, which actually means really, really good. Not too good, it means terrible. Indirection is another actually major problem that causes a lot of issues with startups in Minnesota and in the Nordic countries in particular, in that people don't ask for the sale. People have a very hard time asking for money. They sort of refer to things very indirectly as saying like, we have this piece of software. That's it. Yeah, we have different software. It's kind of cool. You might be interested, maybe not. But if you like it, you can check it out and you might want to pay us. Like that crash plan example, right? Here it is, have fun if you like it. And there's many, many examples there, right? So here's VC funding over time. And Minneapolis, and in fact all the Nordic countries, are incredibly low compared to the rest of the country. On average, Minneapolis and Minnesota startups get about 50 million a quarter, whereas that's one startup in the Bay Area. Should give you a pretty good idea of the scale of the difference of things, right? It creates some very serious problems. Risk averse is one where, Emil was talking about this yesterday and saying, well, he doesn't really agree that Sweden is risk averse, and that may be true, but certainly that part of the Nordic culture has made its way over to the US. Right? It's a very risk averse culture. Like I was showing you at the beginning, with all those big Fortune 500 companies, people go there, they stay there, they pretty much don't move around, they don't start new things. I know 10 or 15 different people who have started a startup in Minnesota, and how it's done is you don't quit your job and eat ramen for a while. It's a night thing, right? You keep your full-time job, keep things nice and stable, keep your safety net fully ready for you, and you just try and do it as a hobby, which, as you can imagine, makes it pretty hard and pretty slow to get things off the ground. And it's one of the reasons there's not a lot of success is that, well, if you've got this hobby thing that you're putting in 5 hours a week, and there's somebody around the corner or down in California doing the same idea and spending 60 hours a week on it, you just can't compete. You never get there. And so here's some data to show you again. This is a Kauffman Foundation, measures entrepreneurial activity by state. Here's a map from 2007. There's another one I can show you from 2013, I believe. And it's hard to read the legends, but green is really bad, blue is sort of okay, and gray is really good. And what you can see is that the Nordic area, in the middle of the country as a whole, really, except for parts of the south, are awful at entrepreneurial activity. There's just not much going on. Here's another map showing the same thing. So blue is terrible again, and gray is good. And Nordic states just aren't pulling it off, right? A lot of those kinds of characteristics that are good things from Nordic culture can actually hold you back a lot when you're trying to do entrepreneurship, which is why a lot of these Nordic inherited cultures in the Midwest and in the sort of mountain range have a hard time moving away from that big culture attitude. And so one just random statistic is that almost half of startup founders are foreign-born. So the fact that all the immigration happened 130 years ago in the middle of the country where the Nordics came from is a serious barrier to our success. If you believe that correlation is causation, at least. And yet at the same time, if you look at innovation indices, supposedly Minnesota and California are the two most innovative states in the country. So we're doing all kinds of interesting things, but we're doing them with big companies. In fact, here's an interesting connection between Minnesota and California. So Bob Noyes, who was the CEO of Fairchild Semiconductor, the company that started Silicon Valley, was from Northern Ireland. Right, very much a Nordic culture, Nordic heritage. And he went out there and brought that same kind of almost, Yantala, right? Everybody's equal, we can have a flat hierarchy, we're all on the same page, we don't need to go ask to spend $5 on pencils or what have you. And he brought that kind of culture out there. And you've all heard about Google 10% time and what have you. That actually started at a company called 3M that's based in Minnesota, where they got 15% time, in part because of this guy named Richard Drew, who invented Scotch tape, right? Who just did his own thing, kept on persisting, never gave up, until he came up with this Scotch tape, and also he invented masking tape as well. Two inventions that are pretty big deals. So this innovative culture is still there and alive, but it's happening at big companies and not in startups. So I am very interested to see that. So we had this first wave of immigrants back in the late 1800s. What's going to happen again in the current wave? I'm showing you that red line there is the percentage of immigrants over time. And it's coming back again, right? And I think that's a great thing because of showing you immigrants driving a lot of immigration. There's half startups in the Bay Area. And I can't wait to see what the future brings. So that's it. Thanks for your time.